Hey everybody, this is Richard and welcome to another episode of Fatal Error. This show began as a research project for me to understand how entrepreneurs and founders think about the climate emergency and figure out ways in which all organizations, not just non-profits, can become climate positive. Today's guest is David Henzel, CEO and founder of UpCoach, as well as several other companies including TaskDrive and MaxCDN. Through his various projects, he currently employs around 200 people, and he thinks that the onus of figuring out a solution to climate change should in fact lie with for-profit entrepreneurs rather than charities. Let's hear what he has to say. And this is not a conversation of why haven't you fixed it or what are you doing or
yeah.
It's more like
I have some thoughts about it, like on how I want to contribute in terms of fixing it, but I also haven't really done that much yet, so it's just fine, just like we'll just talk.
It's the same for me, really. This was sort of, I kind of figured starting to talk to people is kind of a good researchy way of doing it, and then a few people were like, well, we could publish these, so I'm publishing them. So with that out of the way, let's just start with the basic stuff. So when I met you, you were focused on a company called TaskDrive. Yes. And I know before that you were the guy who started and then sold off MaxCDN, right?
Yes, I co-founded MaxCDN, correct.
And now you're doing something new. So UpCoach, I believe you said.
I do a lot of things.
So how do you describe yourself? What do you do? Obviously you're an entrepreneur, but what's the kind of the bio? What's your bio?
So after MaxCDN, which, I've always been an entrepreneur. I dropped out of school at a very young age, and I was always, I didn't really fit into school. I went to 14 different schools, and I was just, kind of the square peg in a round hole. Then I found entrepreneurship, and this worked really well for me, and had a few businesses in Germany, sold my e-commerce business, which gave me the money to get my investor visa to go to the United States, where I co-founded MaxCDN in 2009. And we sold it 5 years ago. Had a really good run with it, had a nice exit. And my wife wanted to go back to Germany because she wanted to be closer to family. And I couldn't go back to German weather conditions after southern sunny California. So I said, honey, I love you, but I can't do this. And so we ended up moving to the south of Turkey, where we're really happy. Yeah. And kind of with your topic that this podcast is about, part of the reason why we sold MaxCDN was that my wife had breast cancer 7 years ago or so. Knock on wood, she's doing great today. But this was a big wake-up moment for me, where I kind of envisioned me on my deathbed, looking back at my life, thinking, did I really do what I was supposed to do? Did I have the impact that I want to have? And kind of like an early midlife crisis, or kind of a sense crisis in terms of what I'm doing with my life. And I decided MaxCDN is cool and all, it's growing, it's fun, but it's not really having the impact that I want to have. Mm-hmm. And then I really thought about, like, what can I do to have a positive impact in the world? And so I thought long and hard about, like, what is this thing that I could do? And initial thought was I want to have a website where they sell products that don't break anymore, because, the cyclical consumption, people build an iPhone, it has to break in 2 years, so you buy a new one, or within a year. And with everything, kind of, there was like, even, I think Honda had like a case where cars were breaking after 100,000 kilometers, was kind of built in, and they got a huge trouble for this. So I want to do an e-commerce store.
Right? Like your software kind of breaks, you need to update it, and then it breaks, the hardware doesn't support it anymore.
Well, with the software, if a software product breaks, it's fine, because there's not that much physical.
No, by break, I mean, the hardware doesn't support it anymore, right? So
yes, or Apple does it, that the old phones become slower with the
exactly. That's what I was getting
like
at.
These type of things. The inspiration for me was like these old school razors, where you have these razor blades where you can kill yourself with, like these things. Yeah. I bought one of those, and I was fascinated by how cheap the razor blades are, and mm-hmm. how little packaging these razor blades come with. And then this razor, if I have a daughter, if I would have a son at some point, I could kind of give this to my son when I die, because he can still use this thing, because it will just never break. And I thought, like, hey, if I look at the normal razors that you buy, it's just so much packaging, so much waste, so much extra cost. I thought, okay, let's do this e-commerce store that has this, sells these products, and then this will have a positive impact.
And did you do that?
No, I did not. I did not.
Okay.
This was like still while Maxi was running, I was kind of thinking about what I can do. And then I thought that's cool and all, but I think there's ways on how we can have even more impact. And I think one crucial thing where we can have a really big impact is when we focus on food, or when I focus on food and do a business in the food sector, because I eat plant-based I'm vegetarian since I'm 18. I'm 43 now.
Okay.
So I've been and vegan for 8 years, 7-8 years or so. So and if you look, there's lots of documentaries out there that how bad the mass consumption of meat is for the environment, for people's health, for climate, blah blah, all this stuff, right?
There's a lot of research been done into that. Yes, I don't remember the percentage, but it's one of the largest percentages.
It's way more than travel and like all cars and airplanes and blah together in terms of pollution. So I thought I'll do something around in this realm, and I wanted to do a seal. I want to buy the domain cleanfood.com. I've been negotiating with the guy for a very long time. He wants a lot of money for it. So I want to make this seal that goes on products where it's like the non-GMO seal, because I've been vegan or vegetarian for such a long time.
Or like this fair trade thing where it's
something like this, because I always read ingredients because I don't want to eat any animal-based stuff, and it's kind of shocking how much crap is in products. Like ingredients list of this long. And
don't get me started on that. But yes, I agree.
And I thought like having a seal like this will be a crazy conversion increase thing. Because if I walk through the supermarket, I see the seal. I say, okay, this looks good. I just take it. I just take it. And I also kind of have like an online store where you can kind of find these products and order them online, like an Amazon affiliate model type of thing for the start, and then later kind of sell these seals to people. But I decided not to do this. I want to do something that I can do right away, and this was. My wife and I figured out that if you apply business principles to family life, everything becomes easier. If you have like roles and responsibilities figured out, if you have regular meetings, if you have, you have a newborn, like this was the kind of the point when it started for us that we figured this out, and especially roles and responsibilities.
A daily stand-up kind of situation.
Yeah. So for us, it was mainly like who is getting up tonight when Emma wakes up, who puts her to bed, who gets her ready in the morning, like blah, all the stuff. Once we had this hashed out, like written down, 80% of our friction that we had went away. And then I thought if we take other aspects, because this worked so well, we took other aspects from business into our personal life, like having family core values, having regular meetings, having like using Trello for our tasks, and and this worked really well. So I started this thing called managinghappiness.com, where I taught these principles to people. It was like an online course.
I think you had sent me something, in fact, a while back when we had first met, if I remember correctly.
Yes, we chatted about this.
We had chatted about this a little bit, so I remember that, yes. Okay.
And so I did this for a while, but this was too much of family therapy. I'm not a family therapist, I'm a business guy, and then I decided to just get back to business because it's just I felt I had to do something. So I started a company called LTV Plus, which is a modern BPO, business process outsourcing call center type thing, where we provide live chat agents, support agents to e-commerce and SaaS businesses.
Yep.
And then we bought Task Drive. A friend of mine, my old co-founder from Maxi, was running this business, and he wanted to just focus on the stock market, and it's like also a people business, similar processes, so it kind of made sense to buy it. So I did this. Then I started Shortlist.io, which is a backlink building business with a friend, Dave Schneider, who did Ninja Outreach before, and this is going really well. And then the latest one is speakonpodcast.com, which is where we book people on podcasts. I did this with a person who was running Task Drive before. And so I ended up having, and also 50SaaS.com is another, so I ended up having a lot of productized services. So I have like a lot of businesses that I'm involved in, but I'm not running the day-to-day. I have business partners or GMs that are running these businesses. And I'm just focusing on organization development and kind of like
Okay. So just to quickly understand something about your background, because this will help me with the topic later on. Would you say that you're more of the salesperson, where the engineer, the kind of the managerial leader, the visionary entrepreneur? What has your role tended to be in these different companies? Or where are your skills? Not that you have to pigeonhole yourself, but where would you say
I think it's the main skill for me is finding amazing people and inspiring them to start something together or to work together. I think like finding really good talent is one of my key strengths. It's just like very serendipitous, just kind of happens all the time. And it's great. And kind of networking, I have a very big network. And business development, kind of like, I talk to a lot of people and I want to always provide value to people and I help them by introducing them to our businesses or to others.
Yeah.
And then organization development, kind of like making, like if you read Traction, the book Traction, Get a Grip in Your Business, I'm a Traction nerd, so kind of like having, dialing it in all the businesses. I think that's my key strength. And it's kind of a very long-winded thing from what I'm doing.
Yeah, no, that's fine.
And managing happiness, I turned into a course so it was an online course before, and it was bothering me that the completion rate was under 7% of people who bought the course. And this would have been fine if I would just care about the money, but I really wanted to just like people understand this concepts that helps them, because I would make money from other sources. And I thought, okay, how can we change this? And then I turned this into a group coaching program, which is still under Managing Happiness. And there we did cohorts of 8 to 10 people. And then I taught them how to figure out your personal mission, your vision, your core values, your 90-day, 1-year, 3-year goals, and your habits that you need to be on your personal A game. Because I did this with all the people who are in my businesses, because then if they're on the A game personally, this is gonna have a positive effect.
This is what you're focusing on now.
No. And so with 50 SaaS, one of our businesses, the CTO also did this course, and he really loved the course. And we were using lots of different tools to get this, to accomplish this. And we thought, okay, let's build some software around this so we can help to make this a little smoother. And we built a software, and which is like a coaching CRM / group coaching tool that we built. And I showed this to a friend of mine, Todd Herman, who's a very well-known coach. He wrote the book, The Alter Ego Effect, because I'm not a coach, I'm just a business nerd.
Right.
So I was like, hey man, can you look at this? I built this thing. What do you think? And he's like, holy cow, that's amazing. I want to invest. I want to be part of this. And so we took the software and spun it out.
That's the dream response, I suppose. Well, not dream in a sense, but yeah.
Yeah, it was the perfect response, and I didn't really expect, I just wanted to get some feedback, so. Yeah. And so we spun it out and got the domain UpCoach.com. And this is where this thing is living now. On 8.8 we have like a bunch of people on it, but on 8.8 is the formal release. So that's and this is where my main time is going to.
So this is what you're focusing on now. Okay.
This is what I'm focusing on. Yes.
All right. So okay, good. That paints like a picture of of where your interests lie and so on. Which, apart from being interesting, it sort of helps me ask you a few questions about this topic of climate and environmentalism and so on. And the first thing I wanted to ask you was, just when you saw that post of mine on Facebook, where I can't remember, maybe I invited you to like the page or something.
You invited me to the page, yeah.
So you dropped me a message where you said like something like, "Hey, this is cool. Thank you for doing this," or something along these lines. Which
correct.
I was very pleased to hear that message, to read that message, but really, what do you mean by that? When you say thank you for doing this, what's your thing? Why do you think this is something we should do?
To raising awareness about this topic, so we can just leave a better planet for our children.
Okay. So, because I debated a lot with myself whether to even do something like this, because it felt like, really, do we need more awareness? But so that's what I wanted to
let me give you another
right?
point why I think it's a good thing, because you are focusing on entrepreneurs. Because I think entrepreneurs run the world, you know, like it's like, because especially in America, like businesses have a crazy influence
Yeah.
on politics, on the world, on everything. And if the culture of a company and the leader raises awareness about certain topics, or like, you know, like if he lives as a great example on, you know, how this should be done, this trickles down to the whole organization, and kind of everybody learns from this and adapts and becomes aware and starts doing things differently.
Yeah.
You know, so this is why I think entrepreneurs have a very big influence in the world. And so I think it's the right place on attacking this. There's also one reason why I did the Managing Happiness thing for entrepreneurs, because when I walked them through help them to figure out their mission, vision, and values, I kind of rub mine into their faces and hope that this will rub off on them, so they kind of get this, you know.
Okay. Well, I mean, that's very close to my thinking, because entrepreneurs in different countries, they have different kinds of influence, but ultimately they're providing jobs, they're providing, employment, livelihoods, and so on. So they do have influence, even if it's not sort of a very corporate environment. The States has this sort of reputation of being in love with business, right? But really, it's influence.
It's a business.
Everywhere.
The US is a business itself. Yeah.
Exactly. So, okay. And you mentioned that you're one of your things is you have big networks, right? And presumably you have quite a lot of people in your network who are entrepreneurs already. You run different.
Majority of my contacts are entrepreneurs.
Exactly. Do you how do you ever have these conversations with them? Do these things come up? Do you have a sense of, as a group? It's hard. It's not possible to categorize entrepreneurs as a group, I think, because there's so many different kinds, right? Well, I mean, it depends on your definition. But for the group of people that you are in your network, is this something they give a shit about, or is it something which is like, oh, somebody else's problem, somebody will fix it, we're just focusing on making money? Or what's your take on it?
It depends. And the conversation, the conversation often comes up because, when people find out that I'm vegan, they ask why I'm vegan, and then this conversation kind of starts, my philosophy is you can't really force people to do anything. You can't just, that's my thing. I live an example, and people think like, oh, that's cool what he's doing. I think this makes sense. I kind of follow that. It's like, because I can't force people to do something, and I don't want to be, argue with people. Also, if people eat meat, that's totally cool. It's fine. Everybody has to make their own decisions.
Yeah.
But, because I think you will, like, if you fight with people, it will not persuade them to do something else.
That's interesting. Actually, in my conversation for this podcast with Steli, he's the sort of the ultimate sales conversationalist kind of person, and this was one of the things he focused on a lot, which is that a lot of people get too angry about this issue, and it puts people off, irrespective of how right they are. And I've experienced that myself. Somebody becoming very aggressive.
Annoying vegans.
Well, of any, not just to be honest, like the thing about, the annoying vegans trope sort of comes up a lot in various places, but it's not just vegans, to be honest. It's more the sort of, I'll be honest, most of the people I know who are vegan are not annoying at all, or at least not about the veganism. They might be annoying about something else. You know who you are. But when somebody is just like focusing on how kind of making you feel like you're a bad person, essentially, whatever the issue,
doesn't help.
It could be diversity, it could be vegetarian or veganism, it could be climate or other things. It sort of puts you on the defensive, right? And then it's hard to get people to change their behaviors.
They should all read Napoleon Hill's, Dale Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People. Really good book.
Yes. So obviously you personally, you're not a climate change denier, right? From what you've said, but even so, people kind of have are kind of on levels of concern or worry, right? Or knowledge about the issue. So sure, at one end, maybe you have, the Donald Trump people who are like, hey, it's all fine, it's a great climate, blah, blah. And then maybe another extreme, you have people who are extremely worried to the point of it's impacting their mental health. And we're sort of, people are worried that things are going to collapse in a few years' time. Where do you fit there? What's your personal stance on this topic? If you have one, maybe, some people just don't know enough.
I do my best to just focus on the things I can influence and not worry about the things I can't influence.
Yeah.
So, and I think we definitely have to do something. I also think that humans are very adaptable once they're forced to adapt. So I think and people are waking up more and more, just kind of, if you take the kind of going back to eating plants versus eating animals, it's, I've been doing this for how long? 43, like for 23, 4 years. I'm vegetarian.
Right.
It was really hard.
Yeah.
Like back in the days, everybody looked at me like I'm an alien. And now it's like very almost mainstream. So I think people are waking up and becoming more aware. And once you have this awareness that you don't want to hurt animals, then you'll at some point have the awareness that you also don't want to hurt the environment. That kind of become just like more spiritual aware that it's this oneness that everything is connected and that everything has to live together. So I guess this is it's coming more and more, and I think people will wake up. And at some point, I heard this some guy say, which I think makes a lot of sense to me. In 30 years, we'll look back at eating animals the same way we look back at slavery, thinking like, what the heck did we do? Like, how could we do something that cruel? What was wrong with us?
Yeah. And so, yes. And I mean, I hope, it depends on your point of view about sort of like the eating animals side of things, because people sort of don't necessarily share the same kind of vegan ethics of like,
but if for example,
wrong to eat animals because they're living things, etc., versus it's wrong to eat them in an unsustainable fashion. There's kind of different things.
I could agree with, like, if somebody raises the animal, it's and kind of treats it really well, and at some point he takes it away from the herd and and puts it down. He does this like once a month. Different thing versus like how. If a fish is living in the ocean and he has an awesome life, and then he has one bad day where he gets killed, it's more okay. This also, first I was pescatarian, and then this was my stance on it.
Right.
Fish has a great life, has one shitty day where it gets killed, and then I eat it. It's okay. Versus, and then I was in downtown LA in a Korean supermarket, and they had like all these fish and seafood alive in these like small aquariums, kind of pile up. Yeah. And I was like, this kind of sucks, and then I didn't want to do it anymore.
It's a different thing. And I think with these issues, sometimes people, they get conflated and people get upset about certain things because, depending on what you're actually eating, being vegan can also be quite, and can have a negative impact on the environment as well. If you're shipping beans from the other side of the world, for example, I don't have the numbers on it, but I've had this kind of conversation, versus eating like chicken once a month that lives in your backyard. And
we have a lot of chicken. We have like 20 chicken and
right.
20 ducks, and we have a sheep, and we have 8 dogs. And we don't eat the eggs. The dogs eat the eggs that the chicken lay.
Oh, really?
Actually, that's a really nice side effect from Corona, I think, also with people waking up more. With all this crisis and hamster buying, panic buying, a lot of people wake up more and start to grow their own food. We have a pretty big plot of land and we grow a lot of food ourselves. And actually my wife is really pushing for building an eco-village here in Bodrum where we live, and like buying a plot of land and kind of creating like a self-sustaining
Okay.
like let's say maybe 15, 20 houses, and having like a big community garden, and having like one kitchen with a chef that's always there that cooks for everybody
Oh,
and
that's
this is
pretty
like
cool.
something that we want to
Yeah.
realize in the next few years.
That's interesting because I guess I live in Scotland at the moment, in kind of outside of about an hour out of Aberdeen, so fairly kind of ruralish. And there are a few community initiatives like that, not as advanced as the one you're talking about, but that would be very cool. But there are like some community orchards and places where you can grow food and stuff. But so you said there was a thing you said when I asked you about like where you position yourself in terms of like where your kind of beliefs about the issue, and you said that you try to focus on things that you can influence, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which makes a lot of sense. But what are those things, right? So obviously you have an influence on what you eat, right?
Yes.
Fine, and you meet people and maybe you discuss it and so on. But what else? Is there anything else that you feel that you are currently able to influence or would like to?
I mean, one thing is building out this eco village idea, right? I think this can, if this works well, can even having like a small school in there. This could like be very attractive and could be rebuilt, like kind of copied. Having
like
this
replicated,
concept replicated, and with working remote, I think that's also a big thing that
Yeah.
Also, another thing is like what I can control is I think we're close to hitting 200 employees throughout the businesses.
Okay.
And we don't have offices, so it's
Okay.
like a remote first company. So nobody has to travel, especially in the
Is
Philippines with a bunch of people.
Is this a deliberate thing though? Like, is
No.
this, no. Okay.
No.
So have you mentioned 200 employees in different businesses. So maybe it's not I guess maybe you don't have big 200 people meetings, because they're kind of
the big with
units,
LTV Plus and Fast we have like 150 people.
Okay.
Zoom meetings. Yeah.
Do these conversations come up internally? Is it something that gets debated in any way inside the company in a kind of sort of not necessarily official capacity, right? Not, but does sustainability, climate change, or any kind of activism of this kind come up as either something people want to talk about that the company should do, or, things like that?
No.
Why not? Is it because you don't talk about stuff that's not work, or is it because of something else?
No, I mean, also I'm not super close in the businesses, so that's also like something maybe they do, but I'm not hearing these conversations. I just like talk to the leads of the companies, and sometimes we do some initiatives to do good. For example, it was like a hurricane, a volcano eruption in the Philippines, and we kind of like organized dinners and lunches for people, kind of handing out food, and we paid for this, and our team members volunteered to do the work, basically handing stuff out. So we've been doing stuff like this, but we have not done anything really climate related.
Okay. Would you?
Sure, absolutely.
There's different, like, I've spoken to some kind of CEOs who are like, I have absolutely no idea where to start, for example, and then there's some people who are like, well, there's a couple of people who are interested, and I've given them some time to do some research, for example, not like a full year or something, take a couple of hours a week to do something like that.
No, it's a good idea. I'll bring it up in the next level 10 meeting that we have with.
Because I've noticed one thing, for example, like a lot of people mention remote work as a sort of thing. Oh, we don't have offices, and that means there's no commute and stuff like that. But I think if it's not done intentionally, it can come across as it can actually be sort of what do they call it, like greenwashing, right? Because I know some companies, so for example, their carbon footprint is through the roof because of the remote nature of the work, because they travel 4 or 5 times a year, A lot of them are traveling on their, they're like digital nomads, and
I used to travel a lot. Before COVID, I used to travel 1 week out of the month. I was traveling.
And hey, I spent like 5 years just up until like a year ago of same, maybe not like, but a week, a month or something like that. So I'm not, pointing a finger. It's more about being mindful really about what kind of things, some people are like, oh, we're remote, so we must be environmentally friendly. But if you get down to measuring it, it's not necessarily the case. So it would be, I haven't actually found any company yet who's actually done this properly yet. When I spoke to Hotjar, they were about to do it, but I haven't followed up with them since. This was like at the end of 2019. And
yeah, you could kind of like ask CEOs to pledge to do something on these calls, and then kind of like follow up with them after X time.
Well, go for it. What can you pledge? What can you pledge to do with your 200 employees?
It's not a real pledge because I don't know what we can do, but what I already wrote down is I'm going to talk to the leadership team on what we can do. So that's like the,
Well, so sometimes one thing I've found with these conversations, because a lot of people have, maybe said, no, I can't speak to you on the podcast. I don't feel comfortable, whatever, blah, blah, blah. But very few people don't want to talk about the issue, right? So I think there's a sort of, you get in some organizations a feeling of this is not really work, it's personal, so maybe I won't bring it up. What if people are upset? I don't want to come across as the person who is, exactly. And it just takes one conversation, like one ping in a Slack room where the CEO is like, hey, is anyone interested in having a conversation about this? Ping me and we'll set something up. And then you might get a conversation going. And maybe not everyone cares, but maybe the few people who do can contribute together to something.
Maybe this could be, that's a cool pledge actually. You can ask everybody who comes on the show. You ask them, you formulate like a cool question, like what could we do for climate change or blah, and you ask them to pledge to post this into their Slack and then report the feedback back to you, what people say.
I have noted that, and you will be the first person I'll follow up with. Okay, brilliant. So I have another thing I want to bring up with you, which is sort of really kind of speaking. So you mentioned, for example, this eco village, right? And it's a really cool idea. It's something I kind of have read a little bit about these kind of things, and I love them. But it does feel very often that, the process is somebody goes, creates a business, maybe sells it or it grows or whatever, it makes a bunch of money, and then we put some aside for kind of charities, right? Or community initiatives and so on, which is fine. I have no problem with that. The thing that kind of concerns me sometimes is that it feels there's this distinction, right? Which is charities are for doing good, businesses are for doing something else, right? Not necessarily doing bad, right? But they're not for doing good. They're for making money, for growth, and things like that. And it feels like that doesn't have to be the case necessarily, right?
100%. I do not like nonprofits because nonprofits feel like they're a car without an engine that other people have to push all the time. So I like the idea of having a for-purpose business, it's questionable like how good it is or not, but a good example is Tom's Shoes, where you buy a pair of shoes, a kid in Africa gets a pair of shoes.
Okay.
Right. Yeah, and then it's like with your business, you do something that's good, or you spend 1% of what you earn, like this time. Actually, that's not the, I think if the,
it depends what it is.
For example,
it can be a bit sort of this corporate social responsibility mentality is like the flip side of the nonprofit. And to me, it's like,
for example, building eco villages. If this eco village concept works out, fine. We could just kind of buy plots of lands, pre-sell the lots, build the houses for people, and kind of turn this into a business. This is like a business that makes money, but has a purpose, right? Kind of bringing people back to
So
nature.
how do you balance that out? Like, what's the right balance here? Because very often, even I myself, like I have a lot of these ideas at the moment of things I'm trying to kind of start here and there, right? Some projects with my wife, some with other people. And it's hard to kind of explain sometimes, or even to yourself, of if you're doing something that has a very sort of, it's very purpose driven, then for some reason it feels wrong to make money off it, right?
No,
I don't mean that for
it
a
does
lot of
not.
people it does, or it's perceived as, or it can be perceived as being wrong. So what's the comeback to that, right? What's your comeback? I mean, I have my own.
My comeback to this is money is a side effect of providing value. If I provide value to people, it's totally cool to make money with this. And if you make a lot of money with this, and then the business grows further, we can hire more people and we can just do more eco-villages. So, and if we're underfunded, then we'll be just like all these, a lot of people that want to do something good but don't get their shit together because they're underfunded. You need to be properly funded to grow something big and to have big impact. If you make more money, you can have bigger impact. This is just like how the world works.
So how do you go about funding something like this, right? Like, I don't know whether you, for example, act yourself as an investor in any. I mean, you invest your time for sure, right? And you've bought businesses and so on, but I don't know whether you act, for example, as a business angel to certain other entrepreneurs.
No,
so but how do you, because traditional investors, and they're sort of, you go to them with an eco-village idea, they'd be like, well, what's the growth rate and how quickly can we 10x everything in a year, right? Or something like that.
Which is totally fine. Would be awesome to 10x it. Why not?
Is that fine? Right? Is it fine for something like that? Because very often the growth kind of a company,
I mean, especially
takes you away from certain core principles. Right? Very often, right?
Yeah, and I know if it just becomes about the money and not about the cause anymore, and you make decisions to. Did you read the book from the Whole Foods guy? What's it called?
Pretty sure I haven't.
It's really amazing. It's called Conscious Capitalism. I think you will really enjoy this book.
Oh,
this
yeah, it's by Ray Dalio. Is that the guy?
No, it's by John Mackey. Let me just Google it.
Okay, I'm gonna have to do that as well. John Mackey, yeah, okay. John Mackey
and this will answer your question that a business can be good and still make money. Like, for example, Whole Foods, like the ideas are getting organic and good foods into lots of people's hands while making the profits. Totally cool. You give people good organic food that they can nourish themselves with. They have to pay more money, but that's totally fine. You don't have to give it away for free. And by making a lot of money, you can just build more Whole Foods. So I think it's same with the eco-village. If we prove out this model and it's growing great, it's fine.
Okay.
And it's like, then you can say like, oh, but you could make it cheaper, and then poor people could also afford these eco-village houses. But if you with something like this, if you prove the model and it's growing fast, then people can copycat this, but you kind of need funds to just like make it big.
Or I suppose you can then diversify yourself, right? And whatever, like you see lots of companies who start off in one way, and then when they're profitable, they'll introduce different product lines, I suppose. You can have a cheaper eco-village, right? Or you can have part of it which is more affordable, or I don't know the sort of details of what you're sort of planning there. Okay, so because one of the things I wanna talk to folks more about is really this thing of capitalism versus non-profit and investment and making money from these kind of things. We're seeing a few more VC firms pop up who are claiming to be like social investors, right? And they want to invest in clean tech and these kinds of things. And capitalism gets a lot of criticism from environmentalists because of primarily, I would say, because of the focus on growth, right? And this sort of growth at all costs kind of mentality that some companies adopt. And I'm not a I'm one of those people who's not like aggressively anti anything. But so there's some things which I agree with on that. And, you know, is capitalism to blame for the situation we're in, sort of carbon-wise?
To some degree, definitely. If you read Conscious Capitalism, you're really gonna you really enjoy this.
Okay.
So,
Well, can you summarize the point of the book, without getting into copyright issues?
Yeah, no, I think it's fine. So they analyzed that that companies who we have to increase shareholders' value with their mission statement.
Mm-hmm.
That these companies are actually growing slower than companies who are conscious. You know, companies who are actually doing something good for people. For one example is if somebody's just like completely driven on having a better quarter next quarter,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and does not think long term, then they cut corners and do shitty stuff. For example, okay, let's lay off everybody who's with us for a long time because they're more expensive, and replace them with junior people, right?
Okay.
But boom, next earnings, we make way more profit. The CEO looks like a rock star, but 6 months later, it declines because customers are unhappy.
Okay.
You know, so basically, if you the idea of conscious capitalism is the old idea of doing business is we have to increase shareholders' value.
Mm-hmm.
And the idea of conscious capitalism is we have to take care of all stakeholders. And stakeholders are employees, customers, suppliers, the community, the planet, kind of being like a net positive, having net positive influence in the world. For example, tobacco companies not that, because, you know, even if they do everything hippy dippy, they will have a negative impact on people's lives, on the society, right? So that's kind of like the core idea. Like if you treat all stakeholders of the business well,
okay,
then you are a good company, and you can still be capitalistic.
So you can do better at capitalism, essentially. That you can. They're making the case that your business will do better.
Yeah, I mean, yes, and it's also
so it's a capitalist argument to be a better sort of a better-hearted capitalist, so to speak.
Yes, correct.
Okay.
And then then you also incentivize to not harm the environment, because you want to. It's one stakeholder is the environment.
Right.
You know.
Okay. I'll definitely have to grab a copy of that book, because.
And there's by the way, you should interview people who are conscious capitalism is also a movement. They have meetings all over the US, and they have like these subgroups. So I think this was something that could be really also in Europe. I think this would be like a really good thingy for you to talk to those folks.
Yeah, for sure. In fact, I see their site has a bunch of. There's quite a few of these things popping up actually, which is really heartening to see. There's something that came across my kind of radar from one of these conversations, was something called Zebras, which is, I think it's called Zebras United. It's a sort of play on Zebras Unite. It's a little play on, you know how these folks, kind of these big breakthrough Silicon Valley companies, they get called unicorns. Mm-hmm. Right?
Okay. Zebras is okay. I understand.
And and they're like, well, a unicorn doesn't fucking exist, right? It's like it's a mythical creature. It's no such thing. Maybe the closest you get is like a rhinoceros to a unicorn, right? Actually, they have two as well, I think. And their point is like, well, you should aim to be a zebra. It's a real thing that you can aim for. And they have all these kind of things where instead of aiming for like breakthrough growth, you aim for sustainable growth or things like that. I don't know the details, but I've been trying to get one of them to speak to as well. But people are very busy, especially now in this COVID period. Everybody has so many childcare commitments. It's impossible to get half an hour out of people. And this is like my 2-hour time window actually, where my oldest daughter is at a kind of outdoor thing and the baby is asleep. Well, he's awake by now presumably, but all right, well, listen, I know we're coming up to 45 minutes actually, so I kind of said we wouldn't be even be that long, but it's been a really good conversation. So look, I'll follow up with you for sure on
how about you define the question what's the ideal question that you would like me to ask?
I think a good place to start would be just simply ping your channels. I think, you know, if you have different business units that are kind of separate, it would be really nice to do it sort of in each one, right? And be like, hey, I just had a conversation with this guy about climate, and I realized that we're not doing anything deliberate about it in this organization. So does anybody want to have a conversation about what we can do? And then they can ping you or the business, like the GM there. And of course, it would be great if you actually do something, right? But I think the conversation, if the CEO legitimizes the conversation, then even if you step back and you don't get involved anymore, people will carry it on, and maybe they'll come back in a couple of months' time with like, hey, you know what, there's this program we can donate some money to over here, or we can get greener web hosting here, because actually AWS is kind of pretty shit carbon-wise, and we should go with it. I don't know, I'm just saying. You know, and but people will feel empowered to come with ideas. It's a bit like the diversity and inclusion kind of debate, or not debate, issue, you know, from that's been building up over a number of years. So whether it's, you know, having more, initially was like maybe women in the workplace, people of different genders, of different backgrounds, and so on. And
I have a you know, it's with MaxCDN, this was like, you know, a few years back, this is kind of when they started, and we were like heavy in tech, and so it was always like how do we get more women engineers, you know? And it's like, not that I didn't want to we like really worked hard to get more women engineers. Didn't work. There's just not enough there. You know, we did like all women who code, we gave our offices to them so they could do it there and blah. We kind of did everything we could to just recruit more, but
yeah,
it's like it's mainly you hire white dudes as engineers. This is just,
I know, and it's still not a solved problem, but it's much easier to talk about in certain organizations, at least, right? Where maybe 30, 40 years ago, if you even brought up that issue, you might have been laughed at. Whereas now, if somebody goes to HR and says like, hey, we really need to hire more female, or whatever, you know, whatever gender, whatever group that you want to focus on, we're not going to be like penalized for it. You know, that might have been the case, actually. People might have said, oh, that's a problem person. Whereas now, for in many places, again, not saying it's a solved problem, but in many places you can bring up this conversation and it can maybe lead somewhere. And I think the climate thing is kind of similar in some places.
I was actually a little frustrated with this, because I really attempted to hire more. I never discriminate anybody. We just like always hire the best person for the job. But I'm, you know, not really sure if it's the right thing that say, okay, we have to hire more women, or we have to hire more people. Whatever.
It's not a topic that I'm sort of expert in any way. And I remember being, you know, hearing that, like when I was recruiting myself, for example, for certain roles, you would get this huge, you know, 90% of applications are, like you said, like white boys, you know, for engineering.
95.
Yeah. Sometimes 100%. And if you can go out and find different people, but it takes a very deliberate effort. And sometimes even that can be hard. So, but I guess my point isn't so much to kind of bring that up as a topic of discussion, because that's really not something I kind of...
It's not the focus of your thing.
It's not that I don't care about it. It's that I kind of feel like the wrong person to kind of discuss it in detail. But just going back to the environmental side of things, I remember a change in certain companies I worked in where, for example, the gender diversity or other diversity issues moved from we can't talk about this, or we're not comfortable talking about this, to we can talk about it comfortably. Because a CEO brought it up as a thing like, hey, you know what, we really should hire more female engineers. And then it was okay to talk about openly as company policy. And this feels like it's a similar thing where a lot of people
to empower people that comes from the leadership team, that it's
if the CEO comes along and says, hey, you know what, I'm I'm vegan because I care about the environment. We just had this conversation and I realized we're not doing anything. If you have any ideas, come to me with your pitch, right? I mean, that might be shooting yourself in the foot in terms of how your inbox will balloon. But, but that kind of thing, then it makes it feel like, oh yeah, we can talk about it. And people might sort of have their own little conversations and something might happen. Thank you for listening. Please visit fatalera.blog to join our mailing list and help support our community and project. And if you like the music, please check out the Happy Quartet on Bandcamp. That's it for today.